guys, welcome to Who Gave Jeff Allen a Podcast. Yeah, that's you. Who gave it? With me, Carollynn Xavier. So, you know, we're usually so just excited, and we're so excited for this guest today, but I have to tell you guys something important. This episode may include discussions of law enforcement operations and efforts to combat human trafficking. While we're trying to avoid graphic and disturbing details, some content may be really intense and really emotional, but please, if you're too nervous to listen to it, go to the antipredatorproject.com or .org to donate.
Trent Steele is a dear friend of mine whom I met years ago, and he's a seasoned investigator, a co-founder of the Anti-Predator Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating human trafficking and sexual predators in the United States. With over a decade of experience, Trent has served as a credentialed federal investigator specializing in counterintelligence investigations involving personnel from the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and the Department of State. He continues to remain active in the counterintelligence field as a government contractor. Please welcome my dear friend, Mr. Trent Steele.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, you and Jeff know each other from way back, but we
just
met.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you guys know each other? How did you guys meet?
So, man, this is, you know what? I remember specifically it was right in the middle of COVID because I was at my brother's house when I spoke to you. I was sitting in my brother's basement when I spoke to you and Lenny on the phone for the first time. So the way we met is I run a nonprofit, and one of the ways that we were trying to fund the nonprofit is by starting this clothing line. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big comedy buff. I love comics. That's what I fall asleep to every night.
That's something a comic
that sounded weird.
Yeah. Well, let me explain this. Lenny calls me. You talked to Lenny.
Yes,
first.
I talked to Lenny first. I emailed Lenny first.
So Lenny calls me and says, "I gave this guy your number. You're going to want to talk to him." And I go, "I am." He goes, "You are." So I figured 15 minutes, maybe, blow you off the phone, and that'll be it. And I think it was an hour and a half conversation.
Yeah, we sat there.
You had just come
2
back.
hours.
You had just come back from Mexico with the remains of a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah, we just gotten back from Mexico.
And I remember asking you, "What do you want from me?" And you go, "Well, we got this clothing line." And I go, "Look, I don't even take my own garbage out." So
that's how we met. And of all the people that I called, because we called and emailed a bunch of different people, Jeff was the only one that took the time to get back to us, that took the time to care. Which it talks a little bit about his character and where he stands in the world. So, and since then, we've become friends. I love his comedy. I go to his shows when I can. I go with him when he's traveling around Florida. So
yeah, you bring your shirts out.
Yeah,
right? We did well in
we did well in Tampa and Wearsdale.
Naples
and Wearsdale.
Wearsdale,
yeah,
that's right.
Wearsdale.
Well, I feel like Trent and Jeff, you guys both talk a lot about the Anti-Predator Project, and you've been involved in it in years, and Jeff, I hear you talk about it at the end of your show all the time. But for someone like me, I know nothing about the Anti-Predator Project. I don't know about sex trafficking. I think we hear that all the time thrown around, sex trafficking. So what exactly is sex trafficking? How does it happen, and how did you get involved into it? And I know that's a big question.
There's a lot there, so we'll start from the beginning. How did I get involved in it? So I started working with children in foster care in 2011-ish, and my job at the foster care agency was to work with kids that were aging out of foster care. So the teenagers that were 16, 17, 18. Teach them how to do all the adulting things, which my wife finds incredibly ironic because I don't do those things myself. When I told her what I was supposed to be doing at the foster care agency, she's like, "They hired you to do what?" I'm like, "Well, listen." She's like, "Well, best of luck to those kids."
By the way, that explains a lot of government.
It does.
Can you do the job? No, not really.
Not really, but we're going to work it out. We're going to learn this thing as we go, right?
Yeah, right?
She's like, there's all these kids, they're independent, they're amazing, they never put the toilet paper back on the roll, they don't take the trash out.
She's like, "You're going to teach them how to balance a checkbook?" I'm like, "Well, She's like, you can barely add 2 plus 2. I'm like, well, we all have our challenges, honey.
Shut up. Everybody knows it's 6.
Exactly. So that's what my job was. And through working with them, I had the opportunity to meet some teenage girls who were human trafficking victims. And their stories were horrible. I met one girl who's, it's a very famous case in Miami, whose pimp made her tattoo her name, or his name, on her eyelids at the Opelika flea market. I had another girl whose pimp took an iron coat hanger and heated it up in a fire and branded her with it. And their stories were horrible, right?
How do they get from street to pimp?
Well, so it's very interesting, right? And recently I've had a whole new take on this. So everybody always wants to say, what does a human trafficking victim look like? Who's the most at risk of becoming a human trafficking victim? And the reality is it can happen to anybody. And all it takes is for there to be one little thing missing out of that child's life, or out of that person's life. It doesn't have to be a child. Whether it's a child that comes from a broken home, whether it's a child that comes from a home that's got 2 parents, but the parents work all the time and they completely ignore the child, whether it comes from a child who's in foster care and has nothing. All these traffickers do, right, is they come in and they set up and they fill a void. They give that person, that child, that young adult, whatever it is, they're missing. And it's interesting. This past year, I've learned to look at it in a very, very powerful way. We travel the country with another organization called the International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators, and we help train law enforcement. And as part of that process, we bring survivors with us that, are now out of the life. And one of the things that this particular survivor does when we're talking with law enforcement at the end of these sessions is she specifically calls out the males in the room. And she says, listen, how many of you have daughters? And they all raise their hand. And she's like, and then she starts calling on them individually. She says, when was the last time you told your daughter you were proud of her? And the wheels start turning, and you can see that, they haven't. And she's like, I highly suggest that you walk out of this room when we're done here and call them and tell them you're proud of her, because if you don't, somebody else will.
Right.
And that's how this works.
That's so powerful.
That's how it works. And that's a very different way to look at it.
Well, that's, one of the things I talk about in my own show with my own marriage was I tell men all over the country, if you don't treat your wife with the love and respect that she deserves, and you remember because you did that when you met her, someone will. Someone will see in her what you saw in her, give her the attention that you should have been giving her. And everybody's vulnerable to that.
Yep, absolutely.
And I can see it with young girls. I mean, and that's, the joke, and I don't want to, in the middle of all of this, make a joke, but that was the thing when I got to college. It was you always find the girl with the daddy issues.
Yep, and that's how this works.
You didn't call me out.
But that's how it works, right? They fill that void, and that's why they talk about like the grooming process, right? Where they buy them clothes, buy them gifts, take them out, tell them how special they are, tell them how proud of them they are. And the thing that's interesting is this survivor specifically talks about how the thing that meant the most and why it was hard for her to separate from her trafficker is because he was the first man that ever told her that he was proud of her. And that meant a lot to her. So that's how this happens. It's the traffickers step in and they fill in whatever gap, whatever's missing in this individual's life. And that's how it happens.
Which is so easy. And you're just saying that. And I'm like, me at 14 on the streets of Los Angeles, no parents looking out. I could have easily fallen for that. A guy that comes in is like, you're pretty, you're this, you're that.
Well, they're also grabbing them. I was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I talked about your organization, and some woman came up with tears in her eyes. They just lost 2 girls at a Walmart in Lancaster. I mean, you talk, it's Amish country. That's, and they're seeking these people out. This is my take on it, because they're not street smart enough to understand that when someone comes and says, "Hey, we need some directions. We need to," and they're that bold and brazen now.
And it's getting worse. It's interesting, right? Because everybody says, well, what can we do, right, to help fight human trafficking? What can we do to help make it better? And we've got the federal government and state government and local governments that have all these resources, but yet it seems like the problems are getting worse, which it is. And it comes down to a couple of things. Number one, human trafficking globally is anywhere, depending on where you get your numbers, is anywhere between $100 to $300 billion a year. Not million, $1 billion a year globally.
That's larger than most countries' GDPs.
It's probably the largest GDP in the entire world. It just overtook weapons trafficking, and drug trafficking is the most profitable crime.
Yeah, what does Apple make in a year?
Yeah, I mean it's ridiculous. And when you put it in business terms, right? You talk about business wise, and then you talk about the fact that people are killed every night in this country over $50 in a gas station register. What are people willing to do to protect a $300 billion a year industry?
Right.
And a $300 billion a year industry that involves very powerful people. It involves politicians, it involves judges, it involves dirty law enforcement. So it's got a very big reach, right? So when you start putting it into those terms and you start talking about it, and then you start talking about how our government allocates funds, right? And I'll give you an example. I work with human trafficking task forces all over the country. And most of those task forces have maybe on the larger side will have 15 or 20 members. But if you go to the drug trafficking task forces, you're talking most of them have 60 to 100 members. It's about where our government is allocating the money. We have some fantastic women, men and women in law enforcement that are out here trying to get this done and trying to fight this battle, but they're fighting it with limited resources. They're fighting it with their hands tied behind their back, and it makes it very tough. I've said this for a long time. If you want to see something, and this is a very unfortunate statement to have to make, if you want to see any real change in the human trafficking space, something bad is going to happen to somebody importance, family member, child, loved one, something. And that's the unfortunate reality of it. Because then that'll get the funds reallocated, where they need to go.
Well, you told me, I think you did, that Nashville, where I live, had one of the best anti-trafficking divisions in the country. And then when they did the defund the police,
it went away.
That was like one of the first cuts they make is in the trafficking.
Yep, it went away.
And allocate resources elsewhere.
Yep, it went away.
Take it one step back, forgive me. So you're working in foster cares.
Oh, yeah. So let me get back. I digressed. My adult ADD got
all
the
three
best
of us
of me.
have ADD.
Oh, well, that's it. So
we keep trying to get Adderall to sponsor us, but they won't. And
I
we're
got
all in
off,
recovery, so
I got
it's
off
not
track.
a good idea.
So,
good idea. Now I'd be crushing it up in the middle. Wouldn't be good.
So anyway,
Jeff's a little odd, but his spreadsheet's phenomenal.
we all have our talents, like I told my wife.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I start working with these kids, and their stories are very disturbing. It's the kind of stuff you go.
By the way, while you were teaching them these adult skills, did they ever look at you and go, "What do you know?"
Oh, all the time, all the time.
What makes you qualified?
Yeah, exactly.
Your wife called, says you can't even balance.
Well, and the real answer is I really don't know what makes me qualified, other than I think I might have been the only person that applied for the job.
That might be. Right.
So, but I start working with these kids, and their stories start to impact me. And I'm going home every night, and I'm telling my wife, man, this is horrible what's happening. And then I start talking to some other friends of mine, and I start hearing about how horrible things are. And I'm like, man, there's got to be something that can be done about this. And so I knew some folks that had worked for the government, and I started talking with them. And so I said, hey, guys, I think we can maybe do something about this. If we get everybody together, we have resources and we know people that can do something about this. So that's how this whole thing came about, is my impact from working in foster care and then getting the people around me in my life that are good people. And I'll say this, I say it every time I can, I'm the lucky person that gets to sit here and have conversations like this with you guys, but I work with the best men and women in the world. These are people that have resumes that they could demand hundreds of thousands of dollars in the private sector, and they work for us, and I say work, volunteer for us for free because they believe in our mission.
At the Anti-Predator Project.
Yeah, because they believe in our mission. And so them and what my team does, they're the ones that make this possible. I get to sit here and have the fun conversations. I get to sit here and laugh. These guys are the ones that make it possible. And they help restore your faith in humanity, right?
Right.
Because you get to work with kids in foster care and you hear about the horrible things that happen to them. You know, one of the cases I had was an 11-year-old girl whose mom would ride her around on the bus and sell her to men for drugs. That's how she was supporting her drug habit. And you hear about stuff like that. You hear about another girl who was raped by her own father, but he was worth millions of dollars. He was paying everybody in the family's bills. And the only reason that girl wound up in foster care is because when she went to the police to say she'd been raped, and oh, by the way, she was pregnant, that the whole family said, listen, we just lost our money train. We don't want you here at our house. So the girl had to go, her entire family dumped on her, right? Mm-hmm. So you see stuff like that, and then you hear all these horrible stories, and it's real easy to lose faith in humanity. And it's real easy to lose faith in the fact that there's good people left in the world. And then you run into folks like my team, and you're like, man, there is still some good left in the world. There is still some people out here fighting to keep this world to be a better place. So that's my spiel on my team. I'm sorry I got digressed again.
That's all right, but one of the impressive things about you when we first met, again, we were talking about raising money for your organization. And you had said you'd gone to one of those big organizations in Miami to get them to do a fundraiser for you. And the first thing they said, you need to fire your board of directors.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the fact you go, nah. And they go, well, then we're not going to raise money for you. And you go, that's okay. Because you are in a business that you need to really trust the people around you.
100%. And the thing is, you know, my board has been with me from day one. And
what year was day one?
It's kind of funny because we actually got our incorporation document on January 11th of 2012, but January 11th, randomly, we didn't even plan this, is National Human Trafficking Day. And that's the day that we actually got our incorporation paperwork from the state of Florida, which was pretty cool. Kind of a cool coincidence.
Here on the Who Gave Jeff Allen a Podcast, we don't believe in coincidences.
That's right. That's right.
We believe in divine appointment.
That's right. And so when we formed this, you know, I didn't know anything about putting together a board for a nonprofit. I didn't know anything about how nonprofit worked. So I went out.
You didn't know anything about foster kids either, and adulting.
Exactly. So. Yeah, I've made
You're an amazing story.
I've made a whole career out of learning as I go here. And I went out and found a whole bunch of people that just believed in our mission, that were good people. And they've been good people, and they've been there since day one. They're not socialites. They're not out here playing the political game and doing this and doing that. And one thing that kills me about a lot of nonprofits, and this is the conversation that this guy and I had. He was a very prominent businessman. He's worth millions, and he had a couple of things that he said, your board needs to go out and raise more money for you. And I said, no, my board doesn't, because my board's very loyal people. They're good people. They believe in our mission. And I would rather have people there that believe in our mission than people that are there just for their looks, just so they can say they're doing something for their community. The people that are on our board are fantastic. So that was number one. So I told him, I said, we're not replacing our board. Then he's like, well, you need to go out and tell the stories of all the families that you've helped and the things that you've done. And I said, here's your problem with that. I am not going to tell the story of somebody's worst days of their lives, the most embarrassing, most humiliating things that can happen to an individual, so I can raise $1, because that makes me no better than the people that were exploiting them in the first place. I said, now, if any of the families that we've helped, any of the survivors that we've helped want us to tell their story, I'm happy to tell their story. The young lady that we helped from Mexico is happy to. She's asked me several times, will you please help tell my story? So I'm happy to help give her a platform to tell the story. But unless somebody says, I want you to tell my story, that story is not for me to tell. Our job was to get them to a safe place, get them back to where they can have a happy life. My job is not to tell their story. Those horrible things didn't happen to me. They happened to them.
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How does that process happen? Like a family contacts you guys?
So it depends. We get referrals from law enforcement. We get referrals from family. We get referrals from...
Are referrals like, this is a missing person and...
Yeah, they'll call us or send us an email. But
well, let's just use the girl from Mexico as an example. She was picked up and taken to Mexico
Correct.
against her will.
Correct.
When she was what age?
16. So
16.
She ran away from home. And this is one of the things that we're trying, when we travel the country, when we train law enforcement, one of the things that we try to do is change the optics of how law enforcement views stuff and change the verbiage of how we talk about stuff, right? So, for instance, I'll use the word pimp. We try to get away from that word and replace it with the word trafficker, because pimp is a word that in that culture is something that's glorified, is something that people look up to. So we don't use that word because we're not going to give these animals the satisfaction of saying, hey, I'm a pimp, I'm this, you know.
Right.
So we use the word trafficker. We call them what they are. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, change the verbiage and how we look at this. So when it comes to missing kids, one of the things we're trying to get rid of is the whole they're just a runaway thought, right? Now, having worked in foster care, I will say this. It gets frustrating because you have kids that will run away literally every other day and then come back, and it gets old and it gets boring having to put them in the system and then take them out of the system and then put them. So it gets old and it gets frustrating, and I understand that. Yeah. However, statistics have been very clear for quite a while now that within about 48 hours of being on the street, somebody's going to approach a child and try to exploit them for something, whether it's for sex, whether it's for work, whether it's for a place to live, something. They're going to try to exploit that child within about 48 hours of being on the street. So essentially, from the time that child goes missing, the clock starts ticking on getting to them before the bad guys do. That's really what it becomes. Mm-hmm. So we try to change that verbiage. But once again, we can change the verbiage all we want to, and we can change the way we look at it. But until the politicians and the decision makers start allocating funds to help, that nothing's ever going to change. And I'll give you an example. There's a law enforcement agency that we worked with in Arizona, and it's a large law enforcement agency in a large city that has a lot of ground to cover.
Right.
They had one detective that was assigned to do missing adults, missing children. I rode with him for one day. His phone rang 19 times with new cases between adults and children. How can we expect one individual, right, to be able to do all that work and do it effectively? But once again, our decision makers aren't allocating the money to go where it needs to go. So this little girl runs away from her home. She's 16 years old. Her dad was a drug addict, right? Her mom was dying of cancer, so things weren't good at home. She runs away. She's couch surfing. She runs into this guy at a party. This guy ends up sexually assaulting her, kidnapping her, and taking her to Texas first.
Okay.
From Texas, she's held there, I believe, for 3-4 months, and he finds out that she's pregnant. Well, he doesn't want to go to jail in America for raping a minor, so he gets a hold of his mom, who is a ranking member of the Jalisco cartel, and has her doctor up some papers, and he takes her to Mexico, where he then holds her hostage for the next decade. He leaves the house, and he literally locks the door behind him. Mm-hmm. And he has 2 kids with her via sexual assault over the next decade. And then the way she got to us is she reached out to us via Facebook, on Facebook Messenger. And it was kind of weird because we get the crazies that come out of the woodwork. The CIA is controlling my mind, all this. So we get...
I'm sorry for sending that.
we get some wild stuff that comes in via our Facebook. So we kind
Jeff's
of
just there. Pizzagate is real.
we get that stuff. We had a lady that reached out to us from Montana that said the CIA had implanted a chip in her brain, and that she was being forced virtually every night to go out and seek men for sex. Like, it was interesting.
I've heard of some odd rationale, but that one.
But even
some schizophrenia stuff.
even then,
Yeah.
we try to run it down and verify it. So we were able to get that lady's name, and I actually called to the police department. It was in Bozeman, Montana, and I spoke with one of the officers out there. They all knew her name. She's a frequent flyer. They had arrested her and put her in the loony bin at least 3 or 4 times in the last week. So they knew her name, and I said, "Hey, I'm just calling to make sure she's okay." And they're like, "No, she's okay. She's nuts, but she's okay."
Yeah.
So, but we get stuff like that all the time. But we try to
mayor of Bozeman.
exactly, probably, probably. So we try to run everything down. So this girl reaches out to us via Facebook and says, "Hey, this is my name." She sends pictures. I'm being held in Mexico against my will. I want help. I need out. My family's in Florida. So she sent me her name and her missing poster. And so I started making phone calls, and I called Homeland Security because they had the case originally. And they're like, "Yeah, no, it's a real case. It's still open, you know." So I'm like, well, maybe there's something to this. So I started corresponding with her via Facebook Messenger and started asking her questions that only she would probably know from the case file. And she was able to answer all of them. So I'm like, well, I think we're onto something here. So we started getting the State Department involved and some other government agencies involved, to no avail. And what ended up eventually happening is I have folks in Mexico that assist me. And so I had our guys in Mexico make sure that she was at a safe house, and we ended up having to fly down to go and grab her then from the safe house.
Was she able to get her children out?
Yeah, we got everybody back. And so the minute we land, I won't get into specifics, but the situation got interesting when we landed. And so we had her meet us at the safe house. We sent her an Uber. Our guys escorted the Uber to the safe house. We ended up taking her back at 2 a.m. the next day. And it was kind of interesting because our own government knowingly issued her a passport in the wrong name, right? So we get to customs, and because the passport's issued in her name, her fake name in Mexico, and we get to customs, and the CBP agent's scanning all the passports. He scans mine, he scans the 2 kids, everything's okay, and he scans hers, and this guy's got the worst poker face in the world, and he pulls it aside, and he says, "You've been selected for further screening."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we get sent to the timeout room, right, where you can't have your cell phone and everything else. And so we're sitting there, and she says, "Well, what do I tell him?" I said, "Well, tell him the truth.
Right.
Tell him the truth. Tell him, who you are and what we're doing here." And so she goes up there, and she's up there for about 15, 20 minutes. And she comes back, and she sits next to me, and she says, "They know that this isn't my real name." I said, "I know that they know it's not your real name. They issued the passport." But they're like, "They want to talk to you next." I'm like, "All right, I'm going to talk to him." So I go up there and I talk to him. And the CBP agent's on the phone with somebody. I can hear the conversation. And the guy asked me my name. And he's like, so I give it to him. And all of a sudden, from the other side of the phone, I hear, "Is that Steele? Is Steele stand? Hand him the phone. Hand him the phone." So he hands me the phone, and he says, I won't put his name out there, but he says, "This is Special Agent so-and-so with HSI. Is she home? Is she here?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "She's standing about 15 feet away from me." And he says, "Well, I won't get into the explicitives because we're on being recorded. Long story short, he says, well done. And he says, hand the phone back to the guy that handed you the phone and tell him to let you out of there and go home. And he says, but one question before you go. I'm like, what is it? He's like, why is her passport in a false name? So you're going to have to take that up with the people that issued the passport. So we ended up getting out of there. But it was actually divine intervention, because if he hadn't been on the phone,
right,
I'm probably down at FDC being charged with human smuggling. I'm
absolutely,
sure.
Man.
So it was divine intervention that we got her back. But she's doing well. She's got a new life now. She's going to school. She's got a job. The kids are in school, and
she's sharing her story.
She's sharing her story.
Yeah,
it's a great thing.
Save lives.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a great thing. So.
I feel shamefully naive. I didn't realize that trafficking could happen like that. Like, oh, I'm just going to take this person for my own personal use. Like, in my mind, it's always like the Epstein Islands of the world. And just, I never even considered like, oh, a pimp is a trafficker.
Absolutely.
I feel so naive, and so I'm so ashamed to say, but I never even, it's
so you and everybody else, because it is not your world.
Well,
that's what the lady in Lancaster, she was shocked in our little town. I mean, it was like, that was what she kept saying, our little town. And
it goes back to what I said earlier, right? It's an issue that unless it affects you personally, or unless it is something that you're involved in, your child got trafficked, something like that. Number one, it's a very uncomfortable topic for people to talk about, so they don't want to talk about it. Number two is there's this myth, and I travel the country all the time, and I talk to people, and it doesn't matter where I go, I always run into several people. It doesn't happen here. That's not
right.
That's not a problem here. In fact, I did another podcast with a bunch of guys out of New York, and the one guy really got combative with me, and he says, "Listen, because we were talking about internet safety with the kids, right?" And he says, listen, I've got a 10-year-old daughter. He's like, and what you're saying, he's like, I've looked at the numbers. It rarely happens. So I'm not taking my daughter's phone from her. He's like, he basically said, he's like, you're part of the problem out here scaring people, making people think this problem's worse than it is. So the issue is this, you've got a lot of people that don't understand what's happening in this country. And there's a lot of people that think that human trafficking is a developing nation problem, right? It happens in Mexico, it happens in Africa, it doesn't happen here in the United States.
Well, I like the word slavery as well,
100%.
because a lot of them are being enslaved into just work.
Well, it's modern day slavery.
Yeah.
It's 100% modern day slavery. And the reality is, if you go by the numbers, there's more people right now that are enslaved around the world than any other point in time in history. And so we have all these days, right, where we celebrate the ending of slavery and this and that. And not only is slavery not dead, it's the worst it's been globally in the history of our world.
Right.
And we just keep looking past it. And the only way for people to take it seriously, unfortunately, is for them to understand the brutal reality of this. The United States is one of the top 3 destinations in the world for human trafficking. Why? Because we have people here that can afford it. We have the buyers. It's just like a business. If you take the humanity out of it and you put it in business terms, these people are selling a product. If you're selling a product, you have to have people that have the money to buy that product.
Right.
Here in the United States, we have the people that can buy that product. And that's one of the reasons why we have this particular problem.
Well, it's almost like when I remember the argument about the cartels were saying, if America didn't have such an appetite for drugs, we'd be out of business. So it's just a supply and demand thing.
Absolutely.
And I love the rationale. Again, human beings can rationalize anything. So I'm in the slavery business because there's a demand for it. I'm just providing a product.
Absolutely. And the drug cartels are masters of that, right?
Right.
So this is why human trafficking has become such a profitable crime, because you've got organized crime groups, everybody from European organized crime to the South American drug cartels, that have now realized the value in this. You bring a key of cocaine over the border, you sell that one time, you've got to go back and resupply. You bring a girl across the border, or you're trafficking a girl, you can sell that human being 20, 30, 40 times in one night, and then you can turn around and do it the next night again, and the next night after that. So it's a product that they can sell multiple times. They have minimal risk, minimal exposure, and they've got a very lucrative customer base. Right. And it's sad to have to put it in those types of business terms, but that's the reality of it.
So in the scheme of like American prostitution, like we were talking about, like the pimp trafficker Florida level, how is there numbers on how many prostitutes are there willingly by unfortunate circumstances, be it drugs, be it whatever, versus actually being trafficked?
Because held against their will.
I'm so dumb to think that I'm like, oh, well, I could see that could have happened to me. I could have got hooked on drugs, and then I couldn't pay for them, and then what else do I have to sell besides me?
Well,
I feel so ashamed that I was like not victim blaming, but in a sense being like, well, you shouldn't have got hooked on meth. Like it just.
And that is an extremely honest answer, and there's a lot of people that feel that way. So there's a couple things, right? Number one, the reality is most trafficking victims go home every night. They're not chained to a bed. They're not held against their will. And when we talk about this, we talk about the invisible chains, right? The things that keep them there. Because everybody says, man, if they're not chained to a bed in the back room or to a pole in the back room, why don't they just leave? Well, because it's psychological warfare. What did we talk about before? If you don't tell your child that you're proud of them, somebody else will. So what do these guys do? They reinforce, I'm the only one that ever loved you. I'm the only one that cares about you. I'm the only one that's ever going to really care about you, right? So they guilt them. But then the flip side of that is, go ahead and leave. You think I won't find you? Go ahead and walk out. I'll find you. I always know where you're at. And it's the other piece of that, the fear for their life.
Fear, right.
And so...
And sounds like fear for their children, which is...
Depending on who you're working for, right?
Chain.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. So they have all these different invisible chains that say, well, if I don't go back and do what this guy wants tonight or tomorrow, I'm going to disappoint him, right? And that's maybe the hardest thing for people to wrap their mind around. And this is where working in foster care really kind of helped me understand this point of view, and why I think maybe some law enforcement don't understand it, because it's hard unless you've had to look at it a different way. So when I was working in foster care, the one thing that I never understood is we would get these kids that were horrifically abused, broken bones, burns by their parents. But yet these same kids, when they would run away, we'd always find them back at their mom and dad's house. And I had an older social worker sit me down once and say, you know, Trent, here's what you have to understand. Mom is always going to be mom, and dad is always going to be dad. And that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. The other thing is, and I had a survivor tell me this, and because one of the things that we do is we take a lot of input from survivors to try to understand the psychology behind all this. And I had a survivor sit me down once and say, you know, she's like, I really appreciate your effort, and I really appreciate, she's like, but you have to get it out of your head that you're some savior that's going to walk into the room and save everybody's life. She's like, you have to understand something. These girls, and we were talking about high-end girls at the time, so girls that were working for $1,000 an hour, $1,200 an hour. She's like, you have to understand. Yeah, they might get beat up. They might wind up in the hospital, right? They might have to do some things they don't want. But she's like, they're driving around in a Range Rover. They have a $1,200 purse. They're wearing $800 shoes. And at the end of the day, as bad as it looks to you, it's better than where they came from. And she's like, you have to understand that. So unless you can walk into a room and offer these girls something better than what they've got, she's like, you'll never win that battle. And so it's a psychology thing that we have to learn how to play. The other thing is this. Sometimes it's like dealing with an addict as well.
Right.
You have to hit rock bottom and acknowledge there's a problem before there can be any real change, right? And everybody's rock bottom looks different depending on where you come from. People that come from normal homes, decent homes, your rock bottom is going to be a lot higher than somebody who grew up in the foster care system, was probably raped, sexually assaulted by their own dad, by family members. Now they're out here, at least they're getting paid for it, right? So what they get beat up, they wind up in the hospital, and to the average person looking at it, you're like, man, why are you going to continue down this path? But as bad as it looks to us, that's not their rock bottom yet.
Right.
And so you have to take the totality of all that into account. And I remember a kid that I had when I was in foster care that was a perfect example of this. He was a good kid, and I remember going to the first time I went to go pick him up. I drove past the house where I was supposed to get him 3 times because I thought it was condemned. Like, I didn't think anybody lived there. It was bad. Mm-hmm. So I finally stopped. I picked him up, and the kid never gave me any problems. Always went to school. He was very respectful, very good kid. We placed him in a foster home in Miami with very good foster parents that they took him. They had a house in the Keys and a big boat, and he went boating every weekend, and they were treating him really, really well. And then all of a sudden, the foster parents start saying, Frankie's stealing from us, right? He's taking money. And so we bring him in, and we sit him down, and you start getting into the psychology of all this, right? And it's really heartbreaking because he says, listen, I took the money because his sister was on the streets, and she was older than him. Mm. And he says, I need to buy my sister a Christmas present. She doesn't have anything. That's sad. That's heartbreaking. Right. And then it kept going, and there kept being theft problems, and there kept being other problems. And what I was starting to realize, and I would sit and talk to him, is the house that he lived in, his normal, his mom was a drug-addicted prostitute in Miami, right? And his normal of people coming in and out of the house at all hours, and his mom buying drugs, and the chaos at this house that looked like it was condemned, to him that was his normal. So that's his baseline for normal. Right. So you got to understand, looking at that, that's what he perceived as normal. So when you take him and you put him in a normal environment with 2 people that care about him, that's the same as taking somebody from a normal environment and putting them into the chaotic environment, because that's the same type of chaos to him. He can't wrap his mind around it. And it's the same kind of psychology when it comes to these survivors, is you have to understand what their perceived normal is, where they're at, and how bad it is.
So did you ever get that when you rescued someone going, I didn't want to be rescued?
Absolutely, all the time. All the time.
And I didn't call you. What are you doing here?
In fact, the average is, they say a girl will go back to the life on average 7 times before they're ready to leave. And that's one of the reasons also why the men and women in law enforcement to do this job, they don't get near the gratitude and the thankfulness that they should get, because this is a frustrating line of work.
Well, I can tell you just in my own experience, I got in the middle of a domestic squabble in a parking lot. This guy was beating his wife or girlfriend, and I shoved him on the ground, and I said, why don't you pick on someone your own size? She jumped on my back and almost ripped my eye out of my head. Yeah. And it was like I'm walking in going, yeah, well, hit on, I guess. I don't know. This is foreplay. I don't know what you call it. But it was like, how ungrateful can you be to, no good work goes unpunished. So my next question was, how many times do you get contacted by the victim themselves as opposed to family members who are looking for their child?
So rarely do we get contacted by actual victims.
So the girl in Mexico was an anomaly.
That's an anomaly. Okay. That rarely actually happens. Most of the time it's family members. Most of the time it's law enforcement that will come and say, hey, listen, we need help with this, from whatever angle they need, whether it's electronics, interviewing, whatever they need help with. So It happens from time to time, but most of the time it's the family. I'll give you an example, like of a family contacting us. This would have been 2 years ago. We had a family, two cousins contact us, and they said, listen, our cousin was talking to some guy out of we don't know where, online, and we haven't heard from her in 3 months. We don't know where she's at. Her cell phone's gone dead. All they had was the dead cell phone number and the one Facebook photo. So it was kind of interesting. So one of our other projects that we've started doing, and we noticed this during COVID, and we've partnered up once again with our friends at the International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators. We've opened what we call the Human Trafficking Technology and Intelligence Centers. And that was opened as a response to noticing that, once again, because...
So is this a database?
Oh, so it's a whole center full of different databases.
Oh.
So, and this was done, and once again, in response to noticing that funds just weren't being allocated correctly out to law enforcement. We would go and try to assist law enforcement agencies with different cases, and we would find that they just did not have the digital equipment, especially the smaller agencies. They wouldn't have the programs, and they couldn't afford them because some of this stuff is very expensive. So with International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators, we've been able to partner with, I couldn't even tell you how many different software companies from around the country, around the world actually, to bring cutting edge technology to law enforcement free of charge. And as part of that, we have access to things like facial recognition, ad ID tracking on cell phones. So what we were able to do
That's right. So you were telling me a story about the facial recognition.
So what we were able to do is run this girl's face through facial recognition, one of the facial recognition programs we have. And all of a sudden, dink, 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 it starts popping up all these porn sites. And it's the girl we're looking for.
Wow.
What we were able to find out after really digging into it is that this guy she met was from Arizona. He grabbed her, took her to Arizona, was keeping her in a room where he had all the windows closed. Every time he would move her, he'd put a bag on her head and put her in the back of a car, so she really never knew where she was at. And he was making her do porn, OnlyFans, a couple of cam sites, and the bank account that people would donate to for her to do certain things was wired directly to his phone. So he was getting all the money. And so we were able to, it took us, I think stem to stern, it took us probably about 7 months to track her down and orchestrate an operation to get her out. But we were able ultimately to get her out and get her reunited with her cousins, but that wouldn't have been possible unless we had that facial recognition. But that's an example of when the family calls us and asks for help as opposed to the victim or law enforcement.
So this is happening in every facet of real life
Absolutely.
and the internet.
Absolutely.
Well, that's the thing. I was just going to say, as someone who has struggled with porn and had my own issues with massage parlors years ago, my moment came at one of the parlors. I was, as someone who was filled with the shame and humiliation that comes with that addiction, laying there, and I remember the girl reaching under the drape, and I said no. And I tapped my wedding ring, and I said, I've got to stop this. And she leaned over and whispered in my ear and said, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized it hit me. I always thought they were there on their own free will, and this is their choice in life, and we're adults doing something what adults do. And it frightened me on one level because, I mean, there's so much that goes on with that as an addict outside of just that part of it. But that part of it really hit me. Never mind the fact, that the marriage vows and all the other stuff I was violating, doing that. And believe me, Tammy and I have had this discussion. I've told her everything, so it's not like I'm breaking any news to my wife.
This is the place to do it.
But right here. But I'm just saying that men that do this don't realize I didn't. I mean, why would I think that? And then you think about the porn sites. You just said the OnlyFans. OnlyFans, I'm sure 90% of the, 100% of the men that go to these OnlyFans sites think they're there voluntarily and they're just raising money. And so what, and then you look at all these other, whether it's Chatterbait or Strip Chat or all these other websites where the girls are on camera. What is the percentage of them that are there against their will?
Yep.
And how many of them are there, because they're adults and doing what, what they feel like they should do. It is. I see the pushback coming from the consumer.
Yep.
Who says, hey, because everybody know it's like if you accuse somebody of when they're looting and you say you're stealing, no, stealing is wrong. Everybody was doing what I was doing, and everybody was taking washing machines and whatever out of that store.
Yep.
So I wasn't stealing. So stop calling me a thief. And now you're looking at people who are consuming these girls online. There's no contact or anything, and they're telling you just stay away.
Yep.
Because these people are here. So that, and then the girls that you rescue again. Obviously, some are grateful, some not so grateful, and like you said, they go back to the life.
Yep. There's been girls we've recovered 3 or 4 different times, especially when you start talking about some of the younger teenage girls. They'll run and come back and run and come back and run and come back, and we just had a court case actually down in Broward County, Florida, of a young lady. It took, because of COVID, it took several years for this case to be adjudicated. But we got involved in it because it involved a 14-year-old girl that was just a habitual runaway. And so we got involved because this was like the 10th or 11th time that particular month she'd run away. And it was really kind of the same thing all the time. She'd run, you'd find her at the home of her older boyfriend, and you'd tell her to go home, she'd go home, and then she'd turn around and run again the next day. So we sent one of our guys there, and he went and knocked on the door of the boyfriend, and the girl wasn't there, and he calls me and he says, hey man, something's not right. This girl's not here. This guy's being squirrely, So fast forward 12 hours later, we find her at the home of a 60-year-old man, or 67-year-old man, where she was having sex with him, and it was being videotaped. When law enforcement raided his house, they found, I think, 4 or 5 other minors on his computer. He was bringing in older women, so this girl, to show this younger girl how he liked it. And that's, a habitual runaway. That girl has since gone back now several times, even though she was a habitual runaway. But I think we've recovered her twice more since that. So that's an example of...
At whose request? Her parents? Or
the grandmother who she's living with. Okay. The grandmother who she's living with. And listen, the Broward Sheriff's Office has done wonderful work on this case. Yeah. I can't say enough about BSO and their detectives and everything they've done on that case. It kind of becomes a community effort. But once again, you can see why some detectives, they'll go to the HT unit or the missing child unit and they'll stay a year and say, I'm done. Right. Because it's frustrating. It's hard work because you're out there at all hours of the night. You're away from your family on holidays. You're away from your family in the evenings. You're gone for 3-4 days at a time on the streets. And then you finally get to somebody and you think that they're going to be so grateful and you get the double tall man and cursed out. And it's interesting because I'll be honest, when the one survivor I was talking to, she told me, and I'm actually good friends with her to this day. We actually formed a friendship out of this. And part of it is because she was actually willing to tell me what I didn't want to hear. And it damaged my fragile ego a little bit, right? When she told me, you're not going to be the hero and you're stupid, she says, if you think that that's what's going to happen. And so
See, again, in art where we sit, you'd think, why wouldn't you be grateful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, I was thinking about, one, I really appreciate your vulnerability with everything you shared, because, I've struggled. I had the same feeling. Women aren't as vocal about it, but I struggled with porn for years, and to think that I was contributing to trafficking
yeah.
is just, it's so painful and hurtful, and I didn't even realize. I thought it was like you were talking about, like everybody's looting, so who cares? It's got to be, and I thought in my dumb head, I was like, it's got to be clicks and views and monetization, and they probably have tons of money, and it's just, that's not the place. So I really appreciate your vulnerability. And then my second thing is, how do you deal with at home? Because I know some people that are prosecutors for like sex crimes with children, and it's like really negatively impacted their relationship with their own kids. You'd think that it would be like, oh, I'd appreciate them more, I'd love them more, but it's actually made their relationship with their kids harder, and also made intimacy with their spouses significantly harder. So how do you navigate, like you're saying, like this hero complex?
Yeah, we're going to be interviewing a guy coming up that was undercover with the outlaw motorcycle gangs. And he would go home after hanging out with the strip clubs, all this stuff, and go home to McAllen where he lived and have Bible study on Tuesday with his church group. And how do you compartmentalize? That's what the question to me was. Yeah, because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask Scott coming up. But how do you shut it down and go home? So I met your wife; she's a saint.
The first thing is the stuff that we have to look at, especially when it comes to the child exploitation stuff, right? The stuff that involves young kids and the violence and the horrific stuff you see there. If you don't find healthy ways to deal with some of this stuff, it will eat your soul. And it will contribute to things like alcoholism, depression, all the bad things.
Well, it's got to turn your faith against humanity.
And it does.
In general.
And this is one of the reasons why I'm so grateful for my team, like we discussed earlier, because they help me get my faith in humanity back. My team, my board, everybody that surrounds me helps me get that back daily. But I also think that healthy coping mechanisms, and this is where we discussed earlier the whole comedy thing. This is why I got so into comedy years ago. I don't go home at night. I don't have much time to watch TV anyway. But when I go home and watch TV, it's not the violent, blow 'em up shows, serious shows. I don't need any of that. I get enough of that in my real world.
Right.
You're like a real Jack Reacher.
I turn on the sitcoms. That's how I found Jeff. I used to scroll and watch dry bar comedy all the time, and that's comedy and laughing has been what's been my outlet for all of this, and trying to keep a positive light. And I have one vice in this world, and that is sports. So I'm a sports junkie.
Who's your team?
Well, it depends on what sport we're talking about now. We're in the middle of the hockey playoffs, so it's the Florida Panthers right now. So those are my healthy outlets. I focus on that stuff, and I try not to, in my personal life, get involved in all this super serious stuff, right? I don't want to sit here and it's kind of funny because I've done a lot of the true crime podcasts, and the market for that is insane, and they've done a great job, and I'm very grateful for all my opportunities that those people have given me, but I've never been able to wrap my mind around the people that want to sit and listen to all the negative things that happen to other people all day. The serial killers.
I'll tell you, when I got hooked on, so I'm going to defend myself here. When I got hooked on true crime, and again, I didn't, maybe 3 months out of my life, but I was addicted to it, and I realized that I slept through all this. All these cases went on while I was alive, and I knew nothing about them. That's what blew me away. Now, John Wayne Gacy, I knew about because I was living it.
Yep.
I used to drive by the house on my way to a comedy club, and I'd see all the dirt out in front, and it was eerie because you're thinking of all the lives that were taken out of that basement. But that one I was aware of.
Yep.
But the vast majority of them, I had no clue. And I was like, Tammy and I would look at each other and go, holy cow, that was like 8 years ago. I mean, where were we? Why wasn't this like on the news? And I'm sure it was locally. But
I've got so many friends that are true crime podcast freaks, and they're always asking me, hey, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? I'm like, guys, I appreciate your passion, but I try to keep my personal life very lighthearted. Yeah. I don't like to dive into the serious stuff, and but that's my coping mechanism. Is I keep my personal life very lighthearted. I don't get into anything that's very serious, because you can only handle so much serious stuff, right, in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Something I've been battling with recently in faith is, you know how the Bible will talk about the devil throwing those arrows, and you get those just flashes of super inappropriate thoughts that just come out of the middle of nowhere. And I've been thinking about, I have a 15-year-old son recently, and 15-year-old son recently. No, I have
15
a
years ago.
15-year-old son.
15 years ago it was
And
recent.
recently, he's like, I think I'm ready to see rated R movies, because I let him just barely dabble with PG-13. And I've been wondering, those terrible intrusive thoughts that we get, would they be as graphic and as detailed if I didn't consume all of those movies, all of those podcasts, all of those cult type things? Because I love cult documentaries. That's my guilty pleasure. And I always think, like, would this be a fully formed thought with imagery if I didn't bring that in? So I can completely understand being like, I see so much of this in real life. I want to keep... It's so funny that you're even doing dry bar comedy. You're like, I even want my comedy clean. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not bringing anything.
I mean, I
extra.
consume all sorts of comedy. I'll be honest with that. But dry bar is one of my favorites. Like we were talking before. It's on my Samsung TV every night when I turn it on before I go to bed. That's usually what's on the TV.
It's funny. I hear that all over the country. Men, not so much the women, but the men will go, I fall asleep to you every night. And it's like, what a way to go to bed laughing. I listen to books. I was listening to Amusing Ourselves to Death last night by Neil Postman. And I fell asleep, after 15, 20 minutes. Tammy plays the Hallow app at night.
Yep.
We listen to prayer. And then when she falls asleep, I put on Amusing Ourselves to Death. And then I go to sleep.
I feel like I'm the only person in the room falling asleep to nature.
Well, so the interesting thing is, years ago, I went to a comedy show at the Improv in Miami, back when it was in Coconut Grove. And the guy that was doing the show was a hypnotist. It was a hypnotist comic.
Tell me you didn't get hypnotized.
No, I didn't. But he had some pretty good words of wisdom that I had never considered at the end of the show. And he explained how the hypnotization process works and how your mind works. And I had really never given it much thought. And he said, you should always try to, if you're going to leave something on the TV or on the radio when you fall asleep, have it be something positive, because your brain is absorbing that whether you know it or not.
Right.
Very much like the subtle thoughts of the hypnotism.
Right.
And he said, I want everybody to go home and think about it. Think about the time that you fell asleep to a murder mystery or something negative and dark. And he's like, if you can remember the last time you had a bad dream or something that was scary, he's like, I'm willing to bet that it was probably while you were falling asleep to that show. He said, if you can fall asleep to something positive and something good, you're going to wake up in a better mood. You're going to wake up with a more positive attitude, ready to take on the day. And whether that's true or not, or a bunch of hocus pocus.
Oh, it makes sense.
It seems to work for me.
That's number 4 in my 5 questions in my book. Are we there yet? Shameless plug. What voices do you listen to? And my theory is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And we live in a great time. You can dial up the greatest minds that God has ever produced on the internet, or you can play Animal Farm.
Yeah.
So
with your time,
Absolutely.
It's so anyway, let's talk about the golf tournament.
Absolutely.
We are the first annual Stand Up to Human Trafficking golf tournament. We are partnering with Anti-Predator Project at West Haven Golf Club on June 30th. There'll be a show June 29th at Zany's Comedy Club. to raise money for your organization. And we're also going to try to partner with the Williamson County Sheriff's Department.
Yes.
And TBI, I remember,
Yes.
the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, to help them with their trafficking. So you don't golf?
Not well.
Oh, okay.
The golf course will charge you extra money if I go out there and start hacking away at their fairways to repair the damage that I will do. I haven't probably picked up a set of golf clubs in at least 10 years. It's been a while since I've played outside of, well, unless you count Top Golf. So
I can't golf
it's
either.
been a
I'm going
while.
to be there driving around the cart making jokes. You want to drive around with me?
Oh, man, I'll ride the passenger seat.
I just love the fact that there'll be a bunch of law enforcement there. They're the best guys to hang with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was at, I told you this, but I'm going to tell them this. I was in Santa Ana raising money for their police department at a fundraiser. In the golf tournament, they had live human beings. They had plastic bullets, and for $25, you got to shoot at plastic bullets at live humans. And I said, if I ever do a tournament, I got to do this. And I said, wonder if we could work this out with Williamson County Sheriff. Now, it's fun. It's fun enough to just hit golf balls at the guy picking them up on the range.
That's right.
But shooting a 9mm,
Yeah. That takes it to a whole another level.
Yeah, their kids are all padded up. They were having a blast. They're running, and then they get hit and they fall down and roll around.
Can I ask one or two things, and then we should probably wrap up? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Who are the comedians that you're listening to at night, besides, of course, our perfect Jeff?
Oh man, the list is extensive.
Give me your Mount Rushmore, top three, Jeff included.
Well, this is where the dirtier side goes. Ralphie May. I love Ralphie May.
Oh, may he rest in peace.
Ralphie May is one of
royalty.
He's one of my favorite comics of all time.
Yeah.
Lately, I've been listening to a lot of Bill Burr. He's funny.
I found Burr during COVID. I had never heard of him. I love Boston. I had to get out of there to stay sober.
Yep.
I was just back for the first time in almost 40 years and worked. I love the audiences. I love the people.
Yep.
But yeah, somebody said to me once, "How does Bill Burr think of that stuff?" And I go, "You ever live in Boston? There's 6 Bill Burrs on every bus stop at 7 a.m.
Okay, so Ralphie May, my husband, quotes this joke all the time: the scuba diving joke. You wanna go scuba diving? And then Bill Burr, do you have what's your favorite Bill Burr joke? Paraphrased.
Well, my favorite thing about Bill Burr is when he goes off about his personal life at home and his frustrations.
Well, my
because
favorite
every guy can identify with that.
I love the line when he said his wife, because Tammy says this to me all the time. How do you go from 0 to 100? And Burr says, "I'm sitting at 50 all day.
I walk in the room at 50.
I'm at 50. The minute my eyes open in the morning, I'm at 50. So that one just crushed me. I thought that was great.
And then of course, listen, Kevin Hart is one of my favorites. Gabriel Iglesias is one of my favorites. I've seen him in person several times. If you are a comedy guy or just a podcast guy and you don't enjoy Joe Rogan, you're nuts. He's one of my favorites. So
that's where we found Scott, who we're interviewing coming up.
Yep.
It was on Rogan. I called Miss Carollynn, and I said, "He lives in Tennessee. You think we can get him?" 5 minutes later, she goes, "He's on."
Yep.
I go, "Holy cow. It's nice to have young people."
Yep. No, absolutely. No, Joe Rogan's one of my favorite. If you dive down other podcasts I listen to, Joe Rogan's one of my favorite podcasts. Sean Ryan is another podcast I listen to quite a bit.
Yeah, I'd love to get him on here. Did you hear that, Sean? Probably have been watching.
So that's kind of how I keep myself entertained. I do a lot of traveling, so I've got a lot of time to listen to podcasts, a lot of times to listen to comedy.
Well, the Who Gave Jeff Allen a Podcast is probably on the top of your list.
It's always one of my favorite downloads.
So now when you go on Joe Rogan, you'll say, that Jeff Allen, who gave him a podcast, is my favorite.
And then I have one more question. I think we should say, if you struggle with pornography, prostitution, anything like that, you should definitely get online and check out your local Samson Society. 100%.
Yes, my good friend Nate Larkin put that together.
And then, I know you probably get asked this so much, but how do people impact their local community that doesn't have the law enforcement needed, besides just making a donation, which I'm sure is phenomenal, and we'll have all the links to make donations to Anti-Predator Project. Is it city council meetings? Is it contacting your congressman? How do we make these small communities have more of an impact?
So one thing that everybody needs to do, and I've become a bigger and bigger proponent of this over about the last couple of years as I travel the country and work with all these different law enforcement agencies, everybody from the federal folks to the state and local folks. And I just see the incredible lack of resources, lack of support they're being given. And I really would like everybody to get out, get to your local, your federal, your state level politicians, and let them know we need to start backing our men and women of law enforcement that are tackling this particular topic more. They need more resources. They need more money. They need more training. We need to allocate funds to go help this particular problem, because there are some incredible men and women around the country that do this, and if they were given the proper resources and the proper backing from the politicians, we could have a much bigger impact. And that, to me, if people really want to make a difference, get to your local politicians. Start hounding them about making a difference with this.
Well, that's what MAD did, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers.
Exactly.
They basically started causing these local DAs to lose elections.
Yep.
They would put their record online for how many drunk drivers they let off and plead out. And when you start causing them elections, they start paying attention to issues.
Yep. And that's the biggest way that we can, make an impact. And then, of course, make sure you get out there and support your local law enforcement. Support, if you've got a good sheriff in town that's running things, get out and vote for him. Make sure he stays around at the next election.
Yeah. And go play in our golf tournament.
Absolutely.
You could help Williamson County Sheriff's Department and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, as well as the antipredatorproject.org. I had a commercial with .com. So I wanted to put a little blurb in there to go, you spell .com. O-R-G.
The good news is we own both domains, so they'll still get us.
Oh, okay.
Great.
So we own them both. Our website guy was much smarter than me when he put that together.
Well, when I got my JeffAllenComedy.com, I wanted JeffAllen.com, and that was a porn portal. So somebody owned it, and I didn't. So
all right, well,
I thought of all these Gaither people going to Jeff Allen. That go, he's got another life.
Okay, so I know we have to wrap up, but I just so desperately want this to be a clip that we could put out to our following. You said New York daughter, 10 years old, don't let her on the internet. Could you just explain to parents with young children why this is a gateway to trafficking for kids on social media?
So the technology conversation is a loaded one, right? Because in our world, technology is not going anywhere. In fact, not only is it not going anywhere, every day it's going to become a bigger and bigger part of our lives. Right. We've seen it with AI, we've seen it with everything else. So I'm going to date myself in age here a little bit, right? When I was young, and I'm sure when you guys were young, the conversation about stranger danger was very much different, right? Mm-hmm. You could, if you saw a stranger at the park or outside your school, you could go tell a police officer, you could go tell a teacher, and then at home, at night, you could come home and you could lock your windows and you can lock your doors and you're safe, right? That's not the case anymore, because you can come home and you can lock your doors and you can lock your windows, and the bad guys still come in through the smartphones, through the laptops, through the tablets. So the real key here is a couple of things. Number one, common sense is a good starter, right? Everything is going good until it's not. Right. There's no reason a 6, 7, 8-year-old should have an iPhone or a smartphone of any kind. Why? We all survived without them.
Yeah, and it's a supercomputer.
That's the thing.
I mean, when you think about what it can do, I mean, it's so far.
Well, and I put it to parents because I always get the pushback from the parents. Like, I'll go talk to school events and PTA meetings, and I always get pushback, and they say, well, all the other kids are using it.
Yeah, my son's pushing back. My granddaughter's 11, and he lets her on TikTok. She's posting Snapchat videos all the time.
So I give him this example. All right, let's take your kid. Let's go downtown. Let's drop him off in a room full of 100 random people and let them babysit for the next 8 hours. You okay with that? Well, that's stupid. Well, if you give your kid a smartphone, you're giving every person with bad intentions unfettered access to them 24 hours a day when you're not watching, when you're not paying attention. They're talking to them. They're texting with them. They come in with Roblox and all these other video games.
Also, it gets to the point where if you're not paying attention to them, they're hearing all those things.
Yep.
Your parents don't understand you. I understand you.
There you go.
You know.
And that's where it comes in. So first and foremost is common sense. Young kids don't need to have unfettered access to smart devices. If they need to use a laptop for school, guess what? They can use it in the kitchen where everybody's walking around. They can do their homework at night. They don't need to have it up in their rooms, right? They don't need to have their phones in their rooms at night. So common sense is the first one. The second thing is just be more involved in your kids' lives. Know what they're doing. Know who they're talking to. Get them involved in activities that take them out from behind the screen. Get them involved in sports, music, acting, anything. Something that gives them somewhere to do, something to focus on, that they're not always behind the screen, right? And then the third thing is, like I said, technology is not going anywhere. But it almost becomes like the safe sex conversation, right? At some point in time, you've got to trust your kids to be responsible and make right decisions. So we've got to teach our kids how to be responsible on the internet, what to look for as far as when people contact them, how people talk to them, the places they go and visit, the things that they put out there. It goes far beyond just the trafficking side of things, right? What people aren't understanding is once you put stuff out there, it never comes back. So we've got kids that are putting things out on the internet now that want to go apply for a job 10 years from now. And the things that they're putting out there, people are going to look back and say, man, well, I'd love to hire you, but you're sniffing a line of cocaine 10 years ago right there, and we put it out at the party. So it comes down to also teaching our children how to be responsible with the internet and how to be responsible with smart devices and computers, because they're very, very powerful things. And one mistake with one of them can impact your whole life negatively.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wise.
Well, Trent, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that you brought Trent and Jeff. I mean, this has been so eye-opening, and it's going to make me cry. But most importantly, of everything I heard today, tell your children you're proud of them. I mean, that's step one, because they could end up trafficked or worse, a comedian.
Yeah. I remember when my dad told me, he goes, "Oh, you're really a comedian." I was 33 years old, 11 years into it. And I laid into bed and I told Tammy, I got it. She goes, "What?" I said, "Approval from the old man." She goes, "Are you whole now?" I go, "Nah, it's about 33 years too late." But there is something to that.
There is, absolutely.
There is.
Absolutely.
Well, God bless you.
Yeah, thank you, Trent. And
thanks for
June
having me.
30th, West
June
Haven
30th.
Golf Club.
Come out, play some golf. Better
And
than me.
subscribe, hit the button, share, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave nice comments, mean comments. Go visit Trent's website. Follow everything.
We're going to have this on our
Anti-Predator
social
Project.
media too.
Yeah, you guys have they have social media. Follow them everywhere. All the links will be down below on whatever thing you're streaming this. God bless you guys. Have a great day.